Welcome,
One's voice is
everybody.
so creepy.
This is Tula over there, and then this is Matan, and this will be for your channel too, Tula, and also for Plutonic Planes. And this is our part two. We're gonna do it on the moon. I
Hmm.
don't have a cover yet, but I'm gonna make a cool cover like the last one where the moon has a face. Should it be
Oh yeah.
smiling or should it be unhappy like this?
I think
Happy.
the moon should be unhappy. Just like we're talking about the sun being unhappy now because no one's really, you know, people aren't really aware of where even their moon is. So I think it makes the planets unhappy.
I
We
think
were
you're right.
talking about the woodcuts before of the sun. The sun had a face and all the old alchemy woodcuts, and the sun wants you to do the sun work. So the moon probably wants you to do the moon work, but people aren't really doing the moon work.
Yeah, they're not
So
doing the moon work.
no.
But maybe we're gonna talk a little about why one would not want to do too much of the moon work.
Right. Yeah, we should really get into the nefarious parts of the moon.
Nefarious. I prefer that
That's
pronunciation, but
that's
nefarious
the
is good too.
what would you say it?
I was just said nefarious. That's the pronunciation I prefer.
Oh my goodness. This is recording isn't it called the dork side of the moon.
It's fucked up.
My
The
friend has a
Virgo side, the
My
Virgo
friend has a
side.
big banner and it says Pink Floyd and it says the dark side of your mom on it.
The dark side of the what? What does it say?
The dark side of your mom, Pink Floyd.
That's awesome. That's so good.
So how do we start when we talk about the moon?
Oh
Because
my
should we,
God.
should we start talking about how the fact that there's so many origin stories where they talk about the time before the moon, where there's no moon? It's in like Zulu folklore. It's in
If we talk
Sumerian
about that,
stories.
then well, let's share a couple. I mean, like, I don't think we should talk about it for very long. I mean, maybe we can return
Right,
to it, but it's important we
right.
address the practical aspects. We can show off our books a little.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You got all your moon books out. I just have the Benatti. Back with the Benatti. I have some more. I got some good moon
That's not
pictures.
even a real
But
moon book right there. That's failure.
what I think, oh yeah. Okay,
No one's
we're
gonna
getting
read
to that.
Benatti. Who's gonna read Benatti? Only the astrologers are gonna read Benatti.
No one. They're gonna be like, this is the most boring YouTube ever because it's gonna be like the 17th consideration is that when one has Saturn, dignified in your rectum or whatever. Yeah, it won't happen.
What?
Okay. But yeah, I'm just trying to imitate
Exactly.
Venati. But what I want to say though about the moon is that, it's a really big part of popular culture and it's a big part of like really superficial astrology, where you see all these books and they're always telling people to do rituals on the full moon, which I don't think is a good idea. Because one of the things that really kind of I always think about is that there are over 100 origin stories where there's no moon. And when you talk to like, astronomers, people who don't believe in astrology at all, they're like, well, the moon is just so strange. It's the exact same distance, from Earth. Like it's just it doesn't make sense from a like the probability of it is like one in like, billions and billions, right? It's tidally locked, so we don't see the dark side of the moon, which is also very interesting. But the fact that there's no origin story or there's no civilization that basically they all have these stories where they talk about the time before the moon. It was like this golden era, and when you think about how the moon controls women, that's where it really kind of like, for me, it ties in with the idea of the Kali Yuga and the idea that we probably moved from a matriarchal society to like maybe a neutral society to now a more patriarchal society because the moon does control women's menstrual cycles, right? And there's no mammal that bleeds 13 times a year. So the whole kind of the link between the moon kind of being put in place to control the fluid of women really intrigues me. I'm really intrigued by this
I
idea.
think you got something there. And in fact, what was very interesting is in the first part of the General Principles of Astrology by Evangeline Adams and Aleister Crowley, there's a little section on each planet, and it talks about each planet mythologically. And right away, they talk about the three faces of the moon.
Mm,
that section. And immediately, I just felt Evangeline writing this. Immediately, she was saying something about the curse on women.
right. Three
And
faces
so,
of the moon is interesting too, because Lilith has three faces, right? There's not a lot of.
well, it's a three-face, what is it? It's a three-face goddess in the sense of the three phases of the moon. Diana, the mother, um, and then the daughter, Persephone, and then Hecate, the crone.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So the
Hmm.
three ages of woman is one distinction of the three faces. What did I say? Faces, or what did I say?
I think you said faces.
I don't know if I meant phases. Phases.
And people are going to be like, but Mario, it's the man in the moon. What are you talking about? It's the man in the
You know,
moon.
and that's really interesting too.
Hmm.
That was a whole, they made the film The Man in the Moon, and there was precursors to that. So that's a whole nother strange mythological, kind of modern mythological creation. You know what I mean? And it came on my feed yesterday, a video, an interview with Ingo Swann. Do you know about Ingo Swann?
Hmm. Oh, yeah. Hmm.
So he was,
You should describe him who he was, and people don't know. They
yeah,
don't know who
he
he was.
wrote a book. He wrote many books, but his main book was a book called, started with a P, I'm forgetting. But he was hired by, I think, the National Security Agency, the NSA, to do remote viewing in like the 80s. And he worked for them for like 11 years. And they
It
had him
was
remote.
earlier than that. Was it really that late in the
No,
80s?
it was 70s. You're right. It was
I
70s.
say.
And he was doing, I guess he got put into this situation where he was supposed to remote view this place, but they didn't tell him where. And he said immediately he went to this world and all these beings were there. And as soon as he got there, they looked at him and he was like, oh shit. And he had to get out of there quick because usually people in the worlds are hypnotized. And so when you go to
Right.
other worlds, you're supposed to just like act like everyone else, just like, oh, I'm just like you guys chilling. But he said that it was pretty quick that he was seen. He came back to his body and is all, where the fuck did you guys send me? I was attacked. I barely made it back. And
You know, Rudolf Steiner says that there's people from the last, I can't remember what epoch it is, what, incarnation, but they're they didn't get a chance to move to Earth because they didn't pass, They're still on the moon. They're these old forces that are within the moon because I think the moon is like prior to reincarnation on Earth, right? I believe in Steiner's world. Don't quote me on that, but I know that he talks about these moon gods and he talks about the old moon and they're supposedly, right, these beings that are still completing their evolution, but just on the moon, not on Earth.
yeah,
They didn't make it.
and then Gurdjieff talks about how the moon pulls on us, right? It pulls on the water, right? It affects the ocean, not just the women's menstrual periods, but it affects all the phases of the moon affect our emotional body, so the water in our bodies. So it pulls against us for us to release energy on the full moons and new moons. And what Gurdjieff said was that what it's doing is it's absorbing our emotional energy. It's feeding on us.
Hmm.
And we either become food for the moon or we develop our own moon within.
That's trippy though, because there's a lot of old folklore that says like when dogs and wolves howl at the moon, like they're doing it because they're like fuck you basically. It's not like, they're howling at the moon because it's this alien and they recognize it as alien.
Fascinating. And that makes sense because dogs can see beyond the spectrum. We all have a bag over our head, but dogs can see beyond the spectrum
Yeah.
and recognize alien forces or energies.
Which reminds me, wasn't I telling you that the first story that Philip K. Dick wrote was from the dog's perspective, which has nothing to do with the moon, but like the dog is like watches humans like they take their food that is obviously the source of all life, right? The most important thing in the world is food. And the humans carefully take their food and they
Go
put it
in.
the stainless steel boxes and they carry it and they put it outside, like in the treasure chests. And then these dudes roll up in a truck and they take it away, and the dogs are like, oh, bark, 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 and they're barking. They're like, they're taking away your food. Like, what the fuck? And everyone's like, oh, why is the dog barking? You know, the dog is such a
You
good.
remind you reminded me of this great song I had, and I've never been able to find it again. It was on this like rare like metal release from somewhere in like Wisconsin or something. It was just like a someone made their own like, all of these songs. They put all these songs together and had this weird metal song that was about a dog on acid. And it was like walking around, tripping out. That was so good.
I like how Wisconsin is the state that you were like, this is the state this would come from. Wisconsin or like Iowa. Right.
No, I know because I found it at an old Amoeba rack for like $3, Amoeba Records. And it was a CD and it was like had all these songs and some of the local bands had their songs. And it was like a wannabe rap metal song. And it was just so weird. It was so weird that a buddy of mine, I played it for him and he was like, I don't even like that at all. And I was like, awesome. It's so strange. It's just so good. I loved it. But I can never find it again. I'll have to remake it myself.
Yeah, you probably can't remember what it was called because it wasn't. Yeah,
I
this is
remember
your
some of
next
the
vanity
lyrics.
project is going to be the dogs. The
Some of
dogs
the
are the
lyrics were pretty
project.
good. It was like doggy woggy or something weird, and he was talking to like a frog. And then it was weird. I can't remember. It was good. It was good.
All right, so speaking of the moon,
Okay,
when
so I found the part, so maybe I can say
find the
something.
part.
So one of the favorite, this is from the General Principles of Astrology. One of the favorite epithets of the moon goddess among the Romans was Trivia, she of the three ways, because she had three forms. She is a woman, both as mother and as child, the dual capacity completing the conception of womanhood, of which Venus is described above as only one part. There is, however, a certain sinister aspect of the life of a woman, to understand which we must go back once more to a consideration of the life of primitive people. And then it just goes and talks about childbearing and sublimation of the arts um, in order to annoy men. What is he talking about? Anyway, it just goes into how it goes into Hecate. So the three faces or phases of the moon, and then
But
the
there's
third,
four phases of the moon, so it doesn't make sense,
then I
right?
must, yeah, it must be just the three aspects then, or the three faces. Because it's just saying the
We can
third.
talk about
Here,
the
here
faces.
it's the third aspects. Here it's the three aspects. So
I mean, we can talk, but whenever I do clients' charts, I look at what moon phase they are, their moon is in. And I use four. So maybe Aleister Crowley lost ability to count when he was up
no,
there hiking
this
in the
is something
Himalayas.
different. She's doing like the faces, not the phases. But yeah, it's good to do the phases of the moon so you know where you are in your life. Like I know that I'm in the first quarter or just past the first quarter. So I
Are
know,
you the first quarter? Wait, I thought you were a full moon. No, are you?
no, how dare you? I'm
Oh
reaching my
my
pinnacle.
God. Sorry, like I'm like, we're not so bad. Like we're illuminating.
No, no, I'm a full moon baby, but in my
Right.
28-year cycle,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
in the just beyond the first quarter phase. So I'm just dropping seeds and seeing what germinates. And so then I'm going to reach my apex, my full moon apex when my career blossoms. Where are you? Do you know where you're at?
I don't know, but we're pretty close in age. Am I
How
around
could
this?
you not know? That doesn't make any sense. You do it for your clients,
I
but
know, right? Well, I
not
know
for
where I am natally because I am a full moon. So yeah, I don't know
your
my
full moon too? No wonder we're teachers.
illuminators, but I don't
Astrology.
know. I can't remember my progress chart where I am. I just sometimes I do people's charts. Like I was like, oh, you have the moon trining Mars. That's a really good aspect. And I was like, wait, I have that aspect. Like,
What's wrong with you?
I'm the last person that gets like recognition, like Libra. Okay, I'm telling you,
I just get
double
like
Libras. We're like we come last. We're like, oh yeah. Right.
I get every reading I get is for me, and I'll get more and more just for me. And the same, even if it's astrology over and over again. I don't care. It's,
Well,
okay,
should we go through the moons and the sign?
yeah,
Because
let's
it's,
do that. That's a
you
great
know,
idea. Why don't we do that?
I mean, you can start because you're moon in Aries,
I hope so. Thank you.
which is a strange spot for the moon, right? I think it's a,
Strange. How dare you?
yeah, yeah. It's weird. Ruled by Mars and so fiery, and then here you have this like the moon is like by its nature, it's kind of this illusionary, even when we start to talk, like, like there's a lot the mystique that surrounds the moon, like, was there a time before the moon? Did we ever go to the moon? Like, what's the dark side of the moon, right? There's the very essence of these questions are very feminine and very nocturnal, and being like ruled by the moon. So Aries to me is just, it's always as someone with an Aries sun, it's the initial, it's the impulse, it comes from the head. It's this cardinal, it's the arising, like for Aries, So for the moon, it kind of makes sense in a way because the moon is your mother, but also your mind, right? But it also just seems that, Aries is just not intuitive sign like that. It's just this rushing forward of information. So I
I,
would think that the
I
moon,
love that. I'm gonna have something for that. I love that. But I'm gonna back up just a little to give people a larger sense. So the moon, yes, as Tula was saying, it's the mother, it's the mind, it's also the brain, the stomach, the bowels, the bladder, the left eye. I think the right eye in women, the left eye in men.
right, that's
Um,
right, it goes back and forth, it
and the
reverses.
breast, of course, too. And, the moon has, I mean, like you were saying, just like the moon has a holographic quality, so does it convey in the physical body almost a holographic quality because it's a subtle awareness.
Right.
When I found out that I was moon in Aries, I was like a teenager. And I remember like knowing about moons for a little while. And I remember when I heard that or read it, I remember going, wow, that makes sense. But it didn't make sense in any logical way because there's something weird about Aries moon. Aries moon tend to be people that are usually seemingly easygoing for the most part. They just seem pretty level. But really, it's a very volatile moon.
Well, you kind of just said it yourself. You said I first found out I had a moon in Aries when I was a teenager, and to me, the moon in Aries it is a teenager. Like it's a teenager. Like you're like, oh, this is my friend Bob, and there's their kid. I haven't seen them for a while, and they're like, hey, this is our kid Hunter, and you're like, hi Hunter, how are you? And the kid's like, hi, blah, blah. And then you talk to the kid, and he's all polite, but then he's just like a raging ball of like hormones and like impulsiveness. Like that to me is the Aries moon. It has the kind of like they can present in this way where they're like, I am learning to become a human. I'm learning to become a person. And so they're very, you know, this is my name, blah, blah, blah. But they have that like that intensity and just that impulsiveness. The impulsiveness is what gets conveyed to the moon in Aries, I feel.
Yeah, so I mean, also we have to think about it in terms of we're dealing with a sign and a planet. So so the sign has to reproduce, or the planet has to reproduce all the elements through, that the planet has to reproduce its elements through that sign. So it's very difficult because there's no sympathy to the moon from Aries. Aries is very
Mhm.
uncomfortable
Right.
in the moon. And so the first thing that we all know who study astrology is that someone with an Aries moon has to be physically active. They have to physicalize all that fire. And if it's too hot, if the rays of the sun are too hot on the moon's head, right, which is what in medical astrology, what rules the head, right, Aries.
Right.
So the
Because
moon,
William Lilly has this whole thing about how Aries sun and Aries rising should never wear hats because you're taking the warmth that's already too hot and you're making it even hotter.
does he doesn't say that about the moon?
It's just the sun and the rising. I don't know why the moon would be. Maybe because the nature of the moon is cool and analytical.
Well, I wear a hat, and then like when I go into work or something like, and it's too hot, I have to go put my whole head under a faucet or under like a spring water,
Hmm.
cool down, because we're so susceptible to the top of the head overheating. Because
So if you wear a hat, do you think
astrology rules. What's that?
if you wear a hat, do you think you're hiding your Aries moon from people?
My Aries moon is already hidden because of the house it's in.
Oh, right, 'cause you have a 12th house
And it's
moon.
conjunct Jupiter, so no one sees it coming.
Right,
So it's already hidden. So maybe I'm further hiding it. Maybe.
right? Maybe.
I'm also mostly protecting the crown, and so that I'm not picking up all the psychic, you know, crumbs of the atmosphere. Okay, so here's the interesting thing I want to share about it. So in this particular interpretation, really reflected on what you were saying because you said something about how did you say it? You said there's not a uniqueness to Aries moon, it's just reactive. You said something like that. Do you remember what you said?
Not exactly. I should have written it down.
It was brilliant because
It's
what?
impulsive.
Yeah,
The
yeah, that's
rise.
it. That's it. You said
Yeah.
impulsive, which is
It
another.
arises. It's like it's, I always think of wait, what's the myth where Athena springs from the brow? Like that's kind of it's like almost like this birth. It's also, I mean, obviously Aries is the star of the zodiac, so the moon is kind of putting this in motion, this, when you have a moon in Aries. Oh, I have a lot of friends at moon in Aries, and they always have the initial impulse. Like they're like the genesis of the moon cycle, It's like it's like the thought, hey guys, it would be cool if we did this. And sometimes I feel like Aries moon doesn't even need to carry on because everyone else is like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Oh, it's just the mere mention. It's the impulse. And then everyone else kind of picks up the work and keeps on going with that?
There's something about and what it is, it described it so well in this book, and it was talking about how it gives being, I mean, one wouldn't maybe think so. One would center mostly on the impulsiveness or the reactiveness because it's the moon, it's so sensitive. And then you add, Aries has to replicate those attributes of the moon. And what you have is what's been described in this particular book was like a great brilliancy, acuteness, and a susceptibility to the senses. And so sometimes that can be misinterpreted as originality, or like genius. But what Evangeline or Crowley was saying was that it's actually like there's such a sensitivity to the sense perceptions, to the nervous system, that there's a nervousness, and mostly the brilliance is like a reaction because it's like a simultaneous moment where it's so sensitive, the Aries moon, because it's the moon, right? And it's
Right.
Mars. So they're completely inimical temperatures to each other. It's like ice and fire. So it's like when they hit, there's an explosion. And so an Aries moon will seemingly pick up what's in the air faster than any other moon sign because of this, because it lives on a terribly fine edge of awareness. And this is what was being described. And I was like, when I read that, I was like, that makes so much sense because Aries, and some people have described, not many authors, but many have said that Moon in Aries is more sensitive than Moon in Cancer or Moon in Scorpio because of this.
Because
Because
and it's also, yeah, it is. When people have sun or moon in Aries, I always say that those Aries placements, I always say they cannot be denied. And like people talk about, oh, what's the sign that everybody feels like, is it Libra, where people are like, oh, everyone loves Libras or whatever. But I always think it's Aries because it's inescapable, like unescapable, the force of Aries, everyone kind of, there's people feel very strongly about other signs, but Aries kind of just tends to dominate in the way that, like, yeah, it can't be denied. It just is, you know.
well, I mean, we can even say this, and everyone knows this, that there's Aries and then there's Aries. In other words, like It's a very special incarnation that represents a deep, old, high level soul that can choose to come into an Aries sun, for example. And they've talked about this because sometimes, it's Aries is the baby. So you would
Yeah.
imagine it'd be a baby incarnation, right? But it's not true. And the same goes for Aries moon, especially if it's in the 12th house. It's going to be like a deep, old soul, that's been through it. And so there is something very special about Aries, even though it's the first sign. Um, so anyway, I just wanted to say that because of what you said.
I
Because
think what gives Aries away when people really see Aries sun, 'cause Mercury never goes right more than like one sign away from Aries. So I probably mentioned this before, if you're like an Aries sun, you're gonna have Mercury in Pisces or in Aries or in Taurus. And like what really gives that rashness away of Aries where people get the bad impression is usually people have Mercury in Aries because that's a hard Mercury placement because it blurts out whatever and it's always correct. It's not like, like I remember talking to a girlfriend of mine and she was just like hysterical and this is like ages ago in the 20s and when we were in our 20s and she was like, classic to her boyfriend like, does this dress make my ass look fat, And he was like, no, your ass makes your ass look fat. I just remembered that he was an Aries Mercury. And I was like, that is like a very classic Aries Mercury thing to say. They just blurt stuff out because they think, oh, this is funny or this is like, it's just the first thing that comes to mind. And so I think that's where sometimes Aries gets its kind of bad rap for. But there it's a truth-telling sign. It's the start of the new year as well.
there was
Right.
another interesting note that I always found really fascinating. And it was this note that here it is, there's a strong tendency to accept all ideas which are presented to one as merely emotional and to leave them thus, as if the mind were naturally attracted to Berkeley and idealism. Now, Berkeley was a philosopher who had this whole conception of the world as like an idealistic realm, like a realm that we've created. It's the whole concept, right, of that we have these days, the whole Gnostic concept that we're in some kind of imagined, scape that's like not really, it's only Saturning seemingly real. And Berkeley idealism is very similar in its concept. And it's kind of fun because as an Aries moon, like there's something about the senses, the sense perceptions, and then that are kind of that impact me, and yet how the world appears to me. I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly, but one more thing to add, unless you want to respond to that, is that we have to remember that we're talking about the moon. So
Right.
one's moon is also a reflective interface with the type of women you attract in one's life. So it's the mother, but it's also the type of women that comes into the querent's life.
And of course, there's many, many astrologers who say that your moon is reflective of, basically it's of your mother, if your moon is in good condition or not. And that being said, I remember like ages ago, I don't even know who said it to me, but I was taking some class and they were saying you will never meet a Capricorn moon that doesn't have some degree of really heavy trauma. And that's always true, And that's like, that's because the moon there is in detriment. And so, I always use this as my example, but, because I live with a Capricorn moon, my partner is a Capricorn moon. And you can really see the moon in detriment in Capricorn because the moon wants to be like the moon almost has this like ego to it where it's like I'm all knowing and intuitive like I'm the fucking moon bitches, right? And in Capricorn the Saturnian influence it limits it, and it won't, it almost goes against the gut instinct of the person. And that doesn't mean that I don't love Capricorn moons because I do, because they just get the job done. But there's really there's a lot of talk in astrology, especially in ancient texts, to overcoming this moon sign. And evolutionary astrology, they talk about it a lot as well, where if you have this moon that's in the most harshest condition, then you really need to develop your spirituality. I think that's really important for all Capricorn moons because they're so good at the practicality of it all, you know? And that's really that trying to see how other people see things. And because I'm a Libra moon, my partner's a Capricorn moon, that's that really harsh square, you know, where it's another kind of an argument for like knowing your partner's astrology or your mother or your child or whatever, because you can work with them, you know, like I can't with my Libra moon, I can't be like, oh, think of how this person feels, you know, like when you said this to them, because they don't get it. I just have to be direct. I'm just like, hey, when you said this to this person, like it may have come off like this. And it's just, you have to kind of speak like the Capricorn moon, you know? So, thinking about that connection between the mother and like the shape of your moon, like if your moon is in good condition, especially aspect wise and of course in sign, domicile or exaltation wise, it really shows. I see that too. I've done so many charts for people that have moon in Taurus and they have these beautiful childhoods, It's kind of lovely compared to the Capricorn moons that have just this total like the parents were like, "You're on your own, like here, latchkey kid, like, there's no
No,
food in the kitchen. Well, just,
it's very
go."
true.
Yeah.
And the trauma can be so bad that it's like they have to reconstruct what it is to be a child again in their life just to get in touch with that youthfulness that was lost, that kind of paradise lost image that we all lend to the childhood life,
The Capricorn moon has to be its own
which is
parent. They
which is
have
the
to parent them.
facade, of course. Yeah, they have, right. They have to, because there's no parent there.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just like, ignored, you know, completely ignored in their childhood usually. So yeah, that makes sense.
Which I want to mention something
We'll
here
get
too.
there. We'll get to Capricorn moon, but go ahead.
But I was going to say with like, with Carl Jung and his anima and animus, I really think that, that you can really see that in people's moon signs as well, because, like when people have, I mean, I know this because I have, my experiences with it, but like, women that need to develop their animus, right, which is the male side of their, of their self, basically. And a lot of times when you have an animus, an overdeveloped animus, you become really critical and you're like, this is how it is, and it becomes really dominant and really male. And it reminds me when women have an animus, overdeveloped animus, like the overdeveloped male part of themselves, where they're constantly like they're setting these limits because they're almost kind of testing it in a way, because myself and a lot of other women I know who have you know issues with the animus, it comes across as like this good thing. You're like, oh, you're really independent and you're really strong and it's very masculine, but in reality, it comes from trauma because you're setting these boundaries that you're like, I know this is correct. You're basically telling everybody these are the rules, because you didn't have parents kind of guiding you. And that's what Capricorn reminds me of. They're like, I'm saying the rules, these are my rules, because I don't really know what the rules are, so I have to, this is how it is. I have to
I have to
make
make some shit up. Yeah.
gotta
Well,
make
I
structure.
mean, even like further standing on your concepts, Jungian concepts, usually when a woman has a very, 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 very strong animus, they're usually taking on the projection of the father, who is usually very controlling or dominant, maybe not fully present, but when present, dominating. And so they take on that caricature inside themselves, right? It's the moon quality. And so yeah, and that's why the animus is really strong and there's that masculine feature within them. And it could be a need to be in control. It could be a need to judge. You know what I mean? There's too much judging, too much
I
control.
think Jung even says too, like it's also very common when the father is absent, because then you create the father. So you're like,
Yeah,
okay,
same,
what is
same
the
different.
dad like? I'm going to make this father figure,
That's
it's
even more extreme. Yeah,
right.
right. That makes sense. So we're going to move on to, well, we touched on it a little, but going into Taurus, Taurus moon. So
Yeah.
Tula touched on this a little, but it's the exaltation of the moon. And Tula said about how usually children or adults who have had moon in Taurus, that the childhood might be a little idyllic. It might actually be a nice childhood. And that's very true. And and so what we get then is we get a moon that is actually a little challenged in processing the emotional world because they didn't have to process all that shit as a child.
Right.
They had it all really easy. So you usually get adults who are just very slow to process emotions. And it's like the partner's on page 43 and they're still on page 2, trying to understand something emotionally. And it could be very exhausting for the other partner.
And Taurus moon is stubborn. I mean, it's the stubborn fixed earth sign, you know. And I think like Taurus moon is also it's like the really, you know, when you have the really I mean, I was telling I think the story, you know, the other day, like when you have, you know, I had a friend, for example, who was like, you know, a model, like a top model, and she was so beautiful, you know, but she you know, she had set the bar and she just didn't really ever, I mean, she was very smart and very intelligent, but she never really needed to cultivate this personality because, you know, she was just so stunning. And she was like, well, I'm just not going to work on my social skills, you know? So people would talk to her and then, you know, but it would be kind of boring. And so they would just talk to the person next to them. It was, you know, and then she developed a complex where she was like, well, people don't like me. And I'm like, well, I just think that, you know, you're kind of relying on, you know, this is how it's always been for me. And Taurus moon can be a little bit like that. This is how it is. This is how it's always been. Oh, you know, there's people that have parents that don't care about their children. Like it's a very foreign concept to them, you know. It's such a solid, you know, I think it's actually a hard spot to have your moon in, even though it's considered to be in its exaltation, because it's hard to get Taurus moon people to kind of budge from their, you know, their kind of version of ideas. And because it's the mind and it's the mother, you know, like it's rooted in this kind of like I wouldn't want to leave this beautiful house either, you know. I don't want to move. I want to stay in
Yeah,
my childhood home, but
it's
my home.
very similar to Aries in a way because Aries, Aries is very sensitive. It gets the impressions of the world and it makes a decision the split second it receives it because it personalizes it. Aries moon is so personal, it's like it's experienced these rays, these neutrinos, and it immediately reacts and the decision is made. Taurus moon is very similar. Once it kind of processes, it's an action is taken already. Their response is action oriented. It's a calibration process with Taurus energy. It's like this brings me pleasure, this does not bring me pleasure.
Right, because you're a Taurus rising. See, I don't have any Taurus in my chart. It's a very foreign. Taurus energy is very foreign to me. I'm like, I don't understand it. Like,
Slow, very slow, very physically slow. Not mentally slow because the Mars and Gemini, but very physically slow to process the world. And so I need to take in all my information, all the pleasures. I have to take them in slow. And I'm slow to process how I feel about them. But that's the rising, it's very personal. It's just as personal as the moon, if not more. But so Taurus energy is just, at its own pace. And the extreme obstinacy, you
I
can't
like how you say it's at its own pace. I'm like, which is not fast.
it's
It's
not
one
at all.
pace. It's slow. It's a slow pace.
Yeah, it's a very slow pace. And I'm like that. I mean, even in my conversation, like my Discord, they joke about when they listen to my, YouTube that they have to put it on like 3 times as fast
Oh,
because I talk so slow.
uh,
Sometimes if I'm in a, Aries moon mood, I might talk fast, but usually I'm very slow. But so there's, I understand Taurus moon because it's the senses, the sense of taste and touch is very important. All the sense perceptions are really important. And that's the general kind of temperament of a Taurus moon is it wants to, just like the moon itself, it's something very, how do you say, it's absorbing its environment, at a delicate rate. It's
Well, it
not.
also kind of mirrors the mother in a way. I've done so many charts where the the person has had their moon. I mean, my really great example is of that person that had Algol conjunct their moon, right? Algol was like the evil star in the throat of Medusa.
We
And
can't just make a generalization like that though.
well, it was on within 1 degree of their moon. And their moon was being squared by Saturn. And Saturn was in the top of the chart. So, all the planets want it. They all vie to be at the top of the chart.
That sounds pretty evil to me. Okay, carry
Yeah,
on.
it was pretty evil. And I just was like, oh my God. And I didn't know this person, but I knew their husband. And so I had done their husband's chart and they wanted me to do their wife's chart. And I said, look, I've done your wife's chart. It's this is so brutal. I'm like, I see this really brutal thing with her mother in the chart. Is it okay if I talk about it? Because I want to make sure. So yeah, there you have Moon being squared by Saturn. Saturn's in the higher position. Night chart, Saturn's at top, cold and dry. Here's this moon in Taurus with Algol, right, within 1 degree. And Algol is also, I think Algol and Mars, right, were in the Trump assassination, right? People
Well, are
talk.
you saying Mars was in Taurus too?
No, for Trump, doesn't Trump have Algol on his ascendant in Mars? And that's people see that. It's
No,
like this.
Trump's not a Taurus rising, he's an Aquarius rising.
No, he's not. He's an Aries. He's Mars. He's
No,
not
he's a
Aquarius.
Leo rising. He's a Leo rising.
He's Leo rising.
Hmm.
Not like I want to. I know everyone just does Trump's chart, and I'm just like whatever, because
Yeah, I do his chart too. He's in is he Leo rising and he has Taurus on the midheaven, so he's out goal on the midheaven.
he's Algol in the midheaven.
And
So
I
it's
think Mars, I think he's a Mars out goal. Shit, I'm gonna have to
might
look it
be
up now.
correct. Anyways, I said to the mother, this woman, when I actually did her chart, and I was like, so can we talk about your mother? Algol conjunct the moon, you know, with Saturn, just kind of squashing this poor moon, the mind, the mother. And I was like, was your mother like, what happened? Like, was she just like tortured? And the woman was like, oh yeah, well, she was just, she was gang raped and that's how she died. Literally is what she said to me. And it's interesting because even though, the mother, she was involved in drugs, she kind of like had all these like suspicious characters around her. The native of the chart just had this simpatico with the mother. Like they just understood and they loved each other. And I see that with Moon and Taurus. Even if the mother, you know, necessarily isn't mothering, they have this like just kind of mirroring that goes on, which is really, really interesting.
So you're saying the mother wasn't necessarily nurturing.
Yeah, but what the woman understood why. People that have the moon in Taurus can understand their mothers, I feel like in this way, even when the mother isn't a good mother. Like they have this way of kind of reasoning it, and it's very sensible. It's very, it's very fixed. It's very like, well, my mother was like this, but here's the good parts about my mother, and they have this relation to their mother, people with moon in Taurus, that a lot of people don't have.
I
So.
don't see that in all cases. I've had a couple of clients who do not have, I think I know one who was Moon in Taurus, but the relationship with the mother was disconnected. But I think that was more connected to like some of his own, like, you know what I mean, other features to that particular moon.
Now I think about it, the clients I see this more in are more female because maybe there's just some kind of underlying kind of like, with the sexes aspect.
There's always a distinction. I've never talked about this enough, but I've always wanted to, but there's always a huge difference between a male with a moon in Aries and a female with a moon in Aries, or a male with a moon in Taurus and a female with a moon in Taurus, because, it's an extra layer. It's an extra layering of complexity, right? But Trump indeed has Algol on the midheaven,
Oh, you found it. Yeah.
and
Okay.
his Mars is in Leo on the ascendant. He has a late Leo ascendant, and certainly enough, his Mars is square Algol,
Mm.
so that makes sense. Yeah, Mars 26 Leo. Actually, his Mars squares Algol exact.
Oh, well, there you go.
And
But
then
that happened as well during his quote assassination attempt, right? There was an Algol Mars conjunction, I believe, when that happened.
a transit Mars, you're saying? I
Yes.
think so. Yeah, I think there was. So, Moon in Taurus, what's the projection? Well, the projection is a woman who's, kind, nurturing, right? I mean, that's the projection. We don't know if that's exactly the reality, but supposedly this is someone who is going to attract, if it's a male or a female, supposedly they're going to attract a moon-like woman because Taurus mimics the qualities of the moon very well. So
Right.
we have a mother in this case who, we can't generalize, and obviously there's issues with our examples, but for the most part, um, there is going to be some kind of quality of a mother who's, domestic, faithful, enduring, all those kind of Taurian qualities, those slow, gradual, which supports motherhood, and supports childbearing.
Well, the moon, more than any other planet, I feel, I really pay attention to whether it's in a masculine or a feminine sign because it really does influence the moon. And that kind of leads back to Jung's anima and animus, right? And that, right, where the anima is the part of, I mean, that's what we were talking about, how everyone loves a sensitive man, like a man that can talk about their feelings because he's incorporated the anima, right? The feminine aspect. And then everyone loves like, a warrior woman because she's incorporating the animus. So it's when you can see these two parts, these two, you know, making this one whole. And so I think that when you see these, when I have clients have the moon in a masculine sign. I feel like it's more important for them to really work on their anima and animus work because otherwise, then you get the projection, like when men are like, oh, like, my girlfriend, yeah, she should be at home more and spend more time at home. Usually it's like, well, maybe you should spend more time at home instead of partying. You're the one that needs to incorporate the anima because we tend to project on the opposite sex, like the part of, our anima or animus that we're not doing a good job incorporating, right? So we
Well,
can,
give me an example with that. Flesh that out a bit for everybody. Give
well, I
me,
think the classic example is if, with the left wing and the right wing, right? So we have like, the left wing is really
no,
right.
I mean, do it with a moon. Do it with someone's
Oh,
moon
with the
sign.
moon. All right, let me do my left wing, right wing thing though, because it's good. Because I do think the left wing tends to really reject this masculine energy, right?
Okay,
They're like,
sure.
no,
Yeah.
patriot article. And then the right wing tends to be like, no, be a trad wife, like go at home and have kids, and they're not incorporating their anima. And so yeah, like what is a good example? If someone has the moon in Cancer, like it's rare you're going to find someone with the moon in Cancer who doesn't want to be home. Like they're whether, it doesn't matter how evolved they are in their moon sign, they're going to want to have this need to kind of like instinctively create this kind of like tunnel fort or you know what I mean? Like where they want to
So,
go
so
and
what
hide.
are they going to project on the partner then?
I think someone that has, well, it depends if they're male or female, right? If they're
Well,
a male with their moon in Cancer, I feel like sometimes they reject all this, the anima, their own anima. And so they're going to project this to the woman, like, you should have made me dinner, or, you should have a cleaner house, or, I see that with Mars in Cancer a lot because Mars in Cancer, men with Mars in Cancer can become really passive aggressive. I think Mars and Cancer, like, it moves so slow. It's just kind of like burbling underwater. And like, it's hard for a lot of people to really get this energy going when you have Mars and Cancer. But that's kind of a classic example of the masculine sign just completely, drowning in the feminine, in the ocean of the feminine, in the
and
womb.
then both projecting onto the female that you need to be more feminine.
Right.
When
Yeah.
really they should be comfortable with their own qualities of femininity, being a moon in Cancer or Mars in Cancer,
Right.
and just maybe the one to make dinner or whatever, you know what I mean? The one
Right.
that play that role. And so then what would you say if a female is moon in Cancer or moon in Mars? Or
Well,
sorry, Cancer, Mars in Cancer.
Mars and Cancer for the female,
Or
I would just
better
say that.
better to stick with the moon. Moon and
Oh, the
Cancer.
moon in Cancer for a woman. Well, that's the thing. Like, when we do the perfections year where the moon, like, the Hellenistic Time Lord technique, where, every year the houses, for example, if you're an Aries rising, then if you're in a first house perfection year, then you're ruled by Mars. And so we look at Mars in the chart for that year, and then the second house would be Taurus. So we look at Venus because Venus rules Taurus, right? When you have these Cancer, are you having a Cancer perfection year right now, Mario, or is it next year?
Uh, no, it starts on my birthday, which we won't mention when my birthday is.
Right.
And it's the same as you. What are you in? You're in your third?
Yeah. But your third house is in Cancer, so you're gonna have a moon ruled perfection year. And so, when people always talk about the moon just being like moody, like, oh, it's like it's a bad thing. I'm like, it's the moon. It goes around the sign so quickly. It's every 28.5, 28.5 days to go around the zodiac, and it's making all these aspects. And in medieval and Renaissance astrology, right? In orrery, it's talking to all the planets. It's basically a communicator. And so, yes, it's moody. It's almost like adapting all the kind of qualities. It's appealing to Saturn, and then talking to Venus. And so, people always it's just interesting where people always say moon in Cancer is moody. I'm like, well, yeah, it's the moon. It's your mind in the feminine. And we say moody like it's a bad thing. But I do notice that when people have their moon in Cancer, they're so sensitive, I guess is kind of the perfect word, to the changing atmosphere, and like and all these different like forces. Like moon in Cancer is always like very attuned. They have their antennas are up constantly. So they're gonna have days where they're like, I'm just, gonna cry all day, and then they have days where they're just like, oh, I'm gonna, you know, uh take on kind of it's a very mutable, it's very changeable, even though Cancer is a fixed sign. I find it really interesting.
Cancer's not a fixed sign, it's a cardinal.
A cardinal sign, sorry, as I meant. But it almost acts like a mutable sign because it's the moon of the moon. And the moon is just it's the quickest moving planet. So,
But what is the projection of a female with Cancer moon?
oh,
What
I
would
feel
her
like dodged.
animus how would her animus be represented?
I
The
don't I
male,
think
right? The anima, is that the anima?
I think the person would need to develop more of an animus because they would probably just be so in tune with their feminine side. It would be like a very prominent, like, and well aspected moon in Cancer woman would be like walking into like your local crystal store and having to live there for like a month. You'd be like, oh my God, this is just too much. People would be like, do you want tea? Are you comfortable? Like, how's your aura? Like, it would just it's almost too intense if you stay there for too long. And that's why I think the moon moves so quickly. And I think the projection would be on not investigating the animus because the animus is so direct. The moon isn't direct. The moon is the anima. It's like the all
Yeah,
sensing and
yeah, you're right. So would have to develop that masculine kind of part of the anima.
force. Just nothing's going to get done. You're just going to be like smudging your house with sage and like, doing your friends' tarot card readings and you know, making like lemongrass tea for everybody.
I
You know
was
what
gonna
I
say
mean?
that
Like,
next. I
go
was
out and
gonna
get
say
a
that next.
job.
Making
Like,
tea.
you don't have any money in your bank account. That would be protection, I think.
All right, let's move on to Moon and Gemini. Now, for Moon and Gemini, I've always said to people too, is like after Aries, I think actually Moon and Gemini is the most sensitive. The reason I've always said that is because they just don't know how to deal with emotions. Like they just can't do it.
I love Moon and Gemini. I have like a bunch of them in my life though. But yeah, you're right. They don't know how to
They
deal with
don't know
emotions.
how to
Of
deal.
like
They can't deal.
I
It's
ha
very
I have three
sensitive.
really close friends at Moon and Gemini, and they all have, and we should mention this too. There's a thing, especially if you go to Astrodienst or astro.com, and when you do your chart, you probably talk to clients about doing their chart. There's like a little thing you can press when the chart is done where it says show the PDF. When you click on it, it shows you what planets are out of bounds, right? And so, the planets obviously are Greek for like the wanderers, planetes, right? Because they follow the sun and they wander. They're not like the fixed stars that rise and then set. And the fixed stars only move, what is it, like 1 degree every 72 years, I think, right? So, we're looking at the same fixed stars rising and setting as people were roughly around 500 years ago,
Sure.
1,000 years. But with the planets, they like to stay a certain degree. So here's like the sun, like going through the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. And the planets like to hang out by the sun. They don't want to go too far away from the sun. So they're in this, it's like there's like a belt that wraps around, the Earth basically when you look at these models and the planets are kind of, if this is the thickness of the belt, the planets are going like this, but the sun is kind of constant, right? And they're all staying very near to the sun. But sometimes the planets go out of bounds, meaning they go kind of a little bit further out. It's like, the kid runs off at the playground and like runs to use the bathroom by themselves and everyone freaks out. Where's Jonathan or whatever? And then, the planet then comes back. But the moon goes out of bounds, roughly like 35% of charts that you will do, I think, will have an out of bounds moon. And when the moon is out of bounds, like it just when a planet is out of bounds, it can behave erratically. So whenever I have a client that has a moon in Gemini and then a moon out of bounds, it's kind of like a double whammy because the moon out of bounds is like how moon in Gemini acts naturally. It's like that toddler energy. It's like
Mhm.
this is cool. Oh, this is cool. Oh, I spilled stuff on myself. And then it cries and has a tantrum. And then right back, like 5 seconds later, it's like, okay, everything's great. That's Moon in Gemini. Yeah, you're right. It can't sit with the moods. It just kind of has to experience them. And everyone has to see it. Everyone has to kind of experience it with a Moon in Gemini. Like you're just along for the ride when it happens.
Yeah,
But they're, for the most part,
it's exactly as you said.
they're
They're extremely quick
quite
to receive impressions. Whether they process through them is like, who knows? That's inside of them, but it's very impactful in the environment, very sensitive, and they're very interested in almost like the moon itself in relaying information that moves through them and passes through. It's
it's
very
the
much,
curious mind.
yeah,
The curious mind.
it's very much a mental moon that wants to, more than anything else, communicate itself to share its impressions on everything, to spread kind of its mental processes around. But it's usually a good critical faculty. Usually they're fairly intelligent people. Um,
They just
yeah,
dart around from topic to
they're
topic. But
very
yeah, I do like
very different to hold down. You know what I mean? To hold down to a discussion or to hold down to like a perspective. There's not enough information, right? There's, like you said, there's an erraticness. And so sometimes it can be very hard to hold them down to like an issue or to a conversation or to my experience anyway. But very
if you could
sensitive.
only pick one moon to have ADHD, it would be the Gemini moon.
Yep, I would agree with that for sure.
Well,
And
we kind of touched on Cancer, so should we go to Moon and Leo, which I feel it can also be like it's the kind of the sleeper problematic moon, the Moon in Leo. I've
yeah,
seen Moon and Leo
I mean,
us.
we pretty much covered. I mean, I'll say just a quick couple of things. I mean, I want to share a couple of things because I really like Moon in Cancer. Maybe because it trines my sun. Um, but there's a receptivity, a kind of sensual awareness, like Taurus Moon, but there's something just more sensitive about, they're the most one of the most sensitive moon signs. But
Moon
there's
in Cancer wants you to be at home. It wants you to come in and be relaxed and like, can I get Moon in Cancer is like,
no,
do you need anything? Do you want
yeah, I
some
want to take
water? Do
care
you
of
want
you. Yeah, no, it's very it's for me, it's my favorite moon sign. I really like that moon sign. I think Charles Baudelaire, the French poet, had it as his moon sign.
Oh yeah.
And he had very dark poetry, but there was a sensuousness to the language, to its expression, like a careful selection of words and their meaning. And I mean, similar to Taurus, it's, it's one of the most comfortable places for the moon, right? So usually a mother that's very, devoted and perhaps conventional. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's the same thing in the sense of it can be a little too much. It can be overbearing. It could be too motherly, right? Like Taurus to the point of like needing to control, right? Or needing.
That's what I was saying. I always get stuck on that Cancer. I always feel like Cancer is a mutable sign, and it's not. And maybe it's also because, we were talking about, when we were just talking about, I bust out the giant tome here, The Secret Teaching of the Ages by Manly P. Hall, where he's talking like a lot about, the moon and the planets. But, the Gnostic belief and a lot of the mystery school beliefs of where you go, you die, and you pass through all the planets, and then except Saturn, right? Saturn is like he's like the gatekeeper because it's the last planet you can see with the naked eye. So it's that limitation. And if you can't pass final boss Saturn, right, you get sent right back to the moon, right? Back to the DreamWorks logo with the little boy fishing in the moon because it's like the soul catcher,
Fishing for
right? Is the
souls, yeah,
moon.
fishing for the souls that
And
drop
it's
back
almost
into the
like,
waters.
and the moon can kind of, yeah, it kind of almost like, I'm like, it can kind of create whatever reincarnation you need to kind of further put you right back, on Earth where you began because you couldn't get past the final boss. So it does have that, I think it's just the intuition of the moon,
It's
of,
the
and being in Cancer.
it's also the quality of the Oedipus complex, right? It's or of mother enmeshment, right? The child is so comfortable. Why leave the nest? Everything is here.
Right,
The mother meets all the needs. Why go out and live
right.
a life? Just stay at home.
And it's the womb and it's so watery. So it's kind of like the archetype for the devouring mother as well.
Yeah,
Like you're
same thing.
lost in the ocean.
Devouring mother archetype, right?
Yeah.
For those who want to explore the devouring mother archetype, this book's incredible. The Hades
Oh, when is it? Oh, I have that book. Yeah, it is really
Pluto
good.
aspect. It's mostly about Pluto aspect to the moon by Judy Hall, but it
That's
goes
why I
into,
have it. So I have Pluto on my moon. So,
yeah,
and we
it,
should mention
they both do.
too, when clients have like when you have like something like Pluto on your moon, it's going to kind of, if you, even if you have the moon in Taurus and it's in a night chart and it's at the top of your chart and it's, aspected, very nicely and it's no harsh aspects are being made to it. Like if you have Pluto on top of it, you're just like, it's over, it flips it on its head and completely changes it. So, there's a lot more than just being like, oh, you have, a Libra moon. Oh, you get along with people. Obviously there's so many different things that can
So
change the
chapter,
condition of.
yeah, and you'll and you guys listening who have Pluto moon, you'll want this book. So there's a quote by Michael Gurian, who's one of the kind of mythology writers for enmeshment, for what happens in enmeshment. And right away, there's a quote by him that says, when a mother abuses her child, she is devouring his soul, his core self.
Mm.
One of his great journeys in life is to retrieve his soul from the depths of the goddess's belly. So there we go, right?
That's interesting.
Journey.
I remember listening to someone talk, maybe it was like, what is it called? The family constellation. What is that practice called? Where it's like it's got kind of psychology, integral systems or something, and
Oh,
people
you got it.
stand in for
You
family
already said it.
members, right?
It's you already said what it is.
But there's something, yeah, there's something that is very uh there's some, they talk about that in these family constellations where, the true meaning of being evil in as a parent, especially as a mother, isn't, there's the obvious evil where the parent is neglectful or, beats the child, whatever. But there's also another kind of evil that's the devouring mother that's also forcing the opinions of the mother on the child, right? It's like, for example, if you have a kid that, really doesn't want to take piano lessons and you force piano lessons on the kid, that's like also a form of evil because you become really animus dominating, and you kind of you're like, I am the father. This is what you do. It's like these Saturnian aspects. You are playing the piano, whether you like it or not, you know? That's also what they say evil is as well. Which is
Well, it's a
what
type
is
of
that Nietzsche,
parentification.
what is that Nietzsche quote where it talks about evil? It's in like it's at the very start of the plague, isn't it? It's like it's the whole thing of man must be careful when he stares into the abyss,
You're talking about The Plague by
you know.
Camus?
Yeah, doesn't it have a Nietzsche quote at the start, or it says like it says the moment that man like believes that he is not evil is when he is, basically. And Nietzsche has all
That's a
this like,
different quote from When Man
is
Stares
it?
into
There's
the
two.
Abyss.
There's one that if you gaze into the abyss for long enough, you become a monster as well, right? Isn't there? There's
That's a
that.
very common quote by Nietzsche. The other one, I don't know what you're referring to yet.
I'm gonna have to find it. I'll look. I'll look.
But that's interesting. I'm
It
gonna have to check out The Plague and or recheck out The Plague. That's a very disturbing book to read. I don't know that I want to reread it.
is. Yeah,
But
don't. That's like we were talking about Eraserhead. Like, do you really want to rewatch Eraserhead?
only if I'm in the mood for it, and I don't
Like,
foresee that anytime soon. Um, so let's go on then to you had some interesting things to say about Leo Moon,
Leo moon? Leo
so
moons.
which seems detriment because it's opposite the sun, but it's
And
not.
I think I see, I mean, I see Leo moons as if they get the attention they need, they're fine. But if they don't, that's when they become problematic. You know, they really need to have that sense of like that sense of self. And like I think Leo gets this really bad rap as well because people are always like, oh, it's pride and it's ego and it's the self. I'm like, but it's ruled by the sun, you know? Like I remember uh years ago one of my teachers telling me that like if you have the sun in the first house, like you kind of have to be egocentric. Like it is all about you because that's kind of like your purpose here, you know? And Leo is almost this true essence of ourself, like where we see ourselves. And I think the difference is sometimes, you know, like I have a lot of Libra, but I have an Aries sun, you know, like sometimes it takes a while to see that sun. Sometimes you never see people's sun sign, especially if it's in the 12th house. But Leo, we tend to see, you know, anyone's Leo placements because it's that kind of that self shining through.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I feel like if it doesn't get acknowledgement, especially like out of like, you know, trauma, like in childhood, that's when it comes out, where it's just like, you know, like a traumatized Leo moon is like the woman that is just like, I'm not getting enough attention at the bar, so I'm just gonna stand on the bar and take my shirt off. You know what I mean? And like everyone kind of loves it in a way 'cause it's a train wreck, but it's also the sign of this, you know, it needs this pride. It needs this kind of like sense of self. And if it doesn't get that, it tends to act out.
Well, it needs something to be either in charge of or it needs some type of mastery. So what I've noticed, healthy Leo moons will achieve some type of mastery in something, and then they can be treated with respect for their mastery for what it is. And the people can come to them for, and then they can kind of be proud about that. But I notice the susceptibility, especially if the wounding is strong, then there's a very, very strong susceptibility to egoism, and
Mm,
kind of falling, as a almost like like a residual, a default system where they begin to operate just on the ego if the traumas are too strong and if they're not able to
right.
or want to, look at that and look at those issues of why there's a trigger for needing to be seen, as right all the time or something, or the one who knows and can't make mistakes, because the sunlight is on the moon. So it's a very, you know, it's a very strange setup because it's the moon. The moon's not supposed to be in Leo. It's supposed to be, Leo's supposed to be with the sun, not the moon. So it's like you're putting the light on the
People
darkness.
who have their people have their moon in Leo that they know that everyone can see their vulnerability when it comes out. I think that's what it is. Like, it's like you suddenly have this like target on your back and everyone can see it. It's hard to hide, and a lot of other moon signs can hide behind, like I mean Moon in Scorpio can like hide secrets forever. Moon in Libra can kind of like hide behind diplomacy. But yeah, Moon in Leo has nowhere to go. It's like, if you catch like a moon in Leo at a moment where it's like ashamed, like it's kind of just projected, it's very clear to see. So it's a hard moon sign to hide because you can't, how are you going to hide in a sign that's like, the domicile of the sun, basically?
Well
It's
said.
yourself. And that being said, like, moon in Leo is especially when someone has it like in an angular house, like the first, the fourth, or the seventh, or the tenth, like that person just shines, So it's very, but it can be very, uh, it can be very fragile sometimes in a way that, Leo is not really known for being fragile because it is the moon.
It's a very sweet moon. I enjoy Moon and Leo a lot because they can be the life of the party. The
Oh,
senses are
always.
highly
They're
developed.
never boring. Yeah, they're never boring. If you have a friend with the moon in Leo, you're never going to be like, oh my God, they never want to go out and do anything. It's always going to be something going on,
And also
They're
very
always the life.
sharp, very intelligent, very, very brilliant. Yeah, it's even though you would think right away like it's not the correct place for the moon, and it's not, but it attempts to mimic those attributes of the sun, and it does to the extent that it can. Are you ready for?
Let's move on to moon in Virgo because that's one of the hardest moon signs for me. I'm trying to think
Well,
of,
just like Capricorn moon, I think it's very similar. I don't think you get a Virgo moon that's not been traumatized.
yeah.
I've never seen that. I've never seen the moon in Virgo not come from a childhood of heavy trauma. I just haven't.
It's like
And
the Howard Hughes moon of like OCD as well, where it just like it's a traumatized Virgo moon just gets into its obsessions and compulsions, like just, like when you walk into their room, like all the pens are all in, all the books are, alphabetized, and all the pens are organized by color, and it's like Moon in Virgo. I mean, Sun in Virgo, I think, has this practical sense and back to the ego about doing this. Like it's very like, I do this for this reason. And Sun in Virgo can be quirky in a way because sometimes their methods of organization don't make a lot of sense, but they're interesting. But Moon in Virgo, it's almost like they're just held to a higher standard of perfectionism. It's like it's not even just themselves, but they really hold themselves critically, and so they're their own worst enemy,
oh yeah.
if things
Uh,
if things don't work out.
yeah, no, it's a
So they
very
can be hard, like, to be friends with because they can be really, really hard on themselves. And you can't just pull them up and lift them up. They have such high standards that,
and it could be very hard to have direct communication with them because the swords are always facing inward, right? So to
right.
create a bridge with them can be difficult because it can be a lot of indirect communication, even you think or it seems like you're talking to them directly. There's going to be a lot of conversation that comes from that side of the street or that side of the street when like there's a bridge right here. Can we take this bridge to each other and communicate directly, Says the Aries moon, right? But the Virgo moon wants to come from over there and you're like, why did you say that? Or or over there and like, what do you mean? Like it's so confusing.
Because it wants to analyze everything constantly, and it's not like there's just one school of analytical thought, it's taking it from all these different realms and trying to kind of compute it and basically make it more precise. I feel like it decimates it. It tries to make things, if there's kind of more abstract concepts, Virgo Moon just tries to break it down to all these easy to swallow pieces, and it's not necessarily the case. And I think it can frustrate the Virgo Moon more than any other moon. They're like the most frustrated moons, I think, are
What
Virgo
do you
Moon.
think the trauma comes from?
I think the trauma comes from expectations. I think the Virgo moon trauma is actually from I bet you. 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 700 years ago, you would have Virgo moons that were not quite as traumatized because I think that it comes from unrealistic expectations with all the complexity of the ages that we live in now with technology and all this inventions and role models and social media. I think that plays a big fact in Virgo moons. I think they do better in their simpler, going back to nature. And like when I see people who are really conflicted as Virgo moons, I'm like, is there any way your retirement plan can be to go buy a farm in the middle of nowhere? Because Virgo is the harvest. Like that's really what it does best is it analyzes. We're giving them too much to take on. It's like they're watching like 20 TV channels all at the same time. And it's like the whole thing, all those studies where they say, well, humans aren't meant to multitask, because they're not. Like it takes like an average of like for instance, if I'm talking to you, Mario, and I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna talk to you, but wait, where's the moon right now? And I'm looking and I'm going, and I'm on my phone. It's something like it takes an average of 9 minutes when I'm done to return and to focus again onto what we're saying. And so I think this multitasking and this like flipping back and forth is, Virgo moon does it's too many choices. And it's just like, yeah, like I said, 800 years ago, it probably was much more efficient and much more happier because it wasn't constantly being subject, it's ruled by Mercury. And so there's that whole thing as well that Mercury, right, in Gemini is the more it's the domicile for Mercury where it's happier because it's flitting about and it's broadcasting and communicating and processing. But in Virgo, it's kind of held to this one task you know of analyzing. And so there's just too much to analyze. It's like you're throwing all this stuff at a poor Virgo moon and it's just like it's too much. Like your old computer being plugged into like new software. It's just like, you know.
Do you think it's analysis paralysis
Yes, that's a good band name. This one's good math rock band name. Analysis paralysis.
or album for a math rock band?
Right near conjunction junction.
So let's move on to Libra moon.
Libra
I'm
moons.
sure you don't know anything
You
about
are
it. I'm gonna have
so
to talk
nice.
about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Libra moon is the same though as the sun in Libra, like where the sun in Libra is fallen because it's always at the expense of the social order. So I see that with the Libra moon
I think
because
they're clean freaks. I think they're
really,
clean freaks.
I don't know if we're clean, but I mean, I can always tell you, like, my living room is always going to be like, there's always going to be fresh flowers, like it's very
That's very Libra moon.
Libra moon, I think.
Everything has to be pretty. Everything has to be pretty and like
Yeah, I mean, look at
everything.
my ring. There's like, even like my altar is all pretty, like it's very, you can tell the Libra. And I think, we get this rep that only Libra maybe understands sometimes like badly aspected, it seems like we are these superficial people pleasers, but we kind of are, like, and we're like, what's wrong with that? We're the harmony, it's not necessarily people don't see it as the deepest moon, but I think that we are in a way because we do feel, the emotions and that, we have empathy for other people like very deeply. But it's, I always say Libra moons are like they're like your friends, if you're friends with a couple and the couple breaks up, you know, and Bob calls you and he was like, she was such a bitch to me, and he's just complaining about his ex, and Libra moon is like, yeah, that sounds horrible. And then the next day, like, his wife calls, he was such an asshole. And Libra Moon is like, yeah, I can see that. But, we can really see both sides of it. So, but to anyone else, it's going to seem kind of like a people pleaser kind of thing. But it is I think it can be really a tug of war to be a Libra Moon because you just, you have to have this order and you have to have things like looking this way. I mean, it's not that I think necessarily we're superficial where we have to have these material things, but you have to have the house looking nice so that you have a welcome environment. And it's not for you, it's for everybody else. It's like, so when you come in my house, you feel at home. Because if you don't feel at home, I feel off. I feel like, oh, I need to make this person comfortable, you know? So we're really doing it all for the greater good. But that's why the sun, right, is always in fallen Libra, because you're kind of always at the mercy of the collective, you know?
Yeah, it's real tough for Libra energy, I have to say, with those type of aspects. So, but the moon is going to bring in the inward quality. And so that's why I always say that whereas a Libra sun is looking for cohesion in the social world, for harmony, a Libra moon is going to be more so looking for in their own realm, like beauty and cohesion and cleanliness and security in that kind of image. For them, it's very important. We're talking about the soul, essence, the instinct, and that's what the moon is. It's where we come from.
Hmm.
That's our most childlike aspect. And so there's a need for the Libra moon to have beauty.
Right. But also, I've always thought it's really interesting with all the moon and the air signs. Our moon is really not our own. Every other sign gets to kind of retain their mind. You know, Libra is for everybody else. Gemini is just so scattered, like it never gets to sit. Like, Gemini moons have a really hard time meditating. They don't know their own mind, you know. And of course, we have Aquarius, it's like it's the social order and the collective. So, like, in a way, like we have a mind that we don't get to really sit with. And it's hard to know because it's kind of just the air sign moons are always just trying to adapt to the circumstances or to the people, And so it's like your mind doesn't really feel private. I feel like when you have an air sign moon, it's constantly at the mercy of other people.
Well said. That's beautifully said. I have to agree with that. Let's move on now then to, we're gonna skip Moon and Scorpio. We talked about this. We're gonna go into Moon and
But they're
Sagittarius.
going to be mad. If we skip Moon on Scorpio, they're going to be mad at us and they might burn our houses down. It's
No,
just,
I love Moon and Scorpio. We're talking about Moon and Scorpio. So Moon and Scorpio, it's rough. It's rough. It's a very rough sign, but it's also a very deep place for the moon.
yeah.
There's a certain depth and a sweetness to Scorpio moons because they just want connection. They just want trust. They just
They
want
also
they want soul. They want to get
they
to the
make
soul.
up those stories and they sit with it, like if they're unwilling to work, I feel like an uninvolved Scorpio moon, if it's not willing to work through trauma, they'll make up a scenario and then they start believing it enough where it becomes real to them and they can't distinguish between it being like a lie that they've told themselves, When we were talking about Scorpio moons, we were talking about Dave Mustaine, and I always think of Scorpio moon as Dave Mustaine being like, "Oh yeah, I wrote that Metallica song." I'm like, bro, it was like, what, 40 years ago. Like, stop. But
And
he's just like
by
told him.
then, is it even true? Did he really write it?
Right, but he believes it. It's like Moon and Scorpio when they really get attached, like that murkiness, like they believe it. Like they're not trying to be assholes, like they believe their own kind of story that they've concocted. But they go deeper. That's the thing with Scorpio moons. They go deeper than they need to. They don't need to like plumb the depths of every single story or scenario or idea, but they do, So they're always going to kind of just be digging and digging and digging and going down the rabbit holes. That's why I have clients with like Moon and Scorpio, and if they're really into, if they have their Mercury as well in Scorpio, and they're just like trying to process this heavy stuff, I'm like, you got to give yourself a break. Moon and Scorpio is like staying up for 48 hours, like, watching every video on YouTube about Pizzagate. That's Moon and Scorpio. I'm like, stop, you're gonna make yourself insane. You need to touch grass.
A healthy Moon and Scorpio will create boundaries for themselves,
Right.
even if it's in denial. So whether it's good or bad, it's what it is. They'll create some kind of frame so that they don't go too far.
Yeah,
But
because it's the fixed water sign, right? It's gonna kind of be like, okay, here's the edges of my pond or bog or marsh or whatever it is, that I'm living in, and like I'm just gonna stay in here and you know, they're gonna kind of know their own depths. That's like a good evolved Scorpio moon. They know They're like those free divers, they're like, okay, they're like, I can only free dive for 2 minutes. That's it. They're not going to push themselves. They're like, I might not make it back.
No, it's a very sweet signature because it's a Scorpio. It's not a Scorpio sun. It's very different than a Scorpio sun. The quality of a Scorpio moon is something very different. They're very aware of their own sensitivity and can embrace it and know that their journey is a journey of trust and are willing to make the necessary, crosses over the bridges to the other so as to link and really create the real intimacy which Scorpio is always seeking for. It's a little easier if you have Mercury in Sagittarius instead of Scorpio, because otherwise, as we were talking, the Mercury will go into overdrive and to analyze everything to death.
Right.
With a Mercury and Sag, there'll be a calmer kind of context for the Scorpio moon. And, but it could be any Mercury, right? I mean, moon moves
Well,
so
everyone
quickly.
can see a Scorpio sun. I feel like that's the difference. Not everyone can see a Scorpio moon. It's pretty hidden a lot of the time too. You can have people that have like, these really pleasant, placements. Like, they could be like really sweet. They could be like a Pisces sun and, they could have like, uh Mercury and Aries, so a little quirky and a little interesting, and then they could have like, Venus and Capricorn, so traditional. But then they could have a Scorpio moon, and you wouldn't necessarily see that with those other placements. The other placements just kind of take over, and you'd have to get to know them to really see that Scorpio moon.
I don't
And
know.
that's the
I
80s.
can I can see it. I can see it usually.
You
But
can.
it's interesting because you're correct. The physical features will not mirror that, but the tone of voice could betray it. The eyes could betray it. At least for me, how I perceive it, because there's some Martian edge to the person. Usually the hair could be a little dark or the eyes a little dark, and so I can kind of see it, but that's just
Yeah, we tend to forget because Scorpio can be so secretive and intense. We tend to forget that it is ruled by Mars, like sometimes that drive is a little hidden because it gets kind of buried in that, just the depths and the intensity and kind of the brooding, sexuality as well as Scorpio. But yeah, it's ruled by Mars. It's very driven when it wants to be.
yeah. Let's
Good
move on
career
to
moon as well. Good
what's
career.
that?
Good moon for a career. Like, Scorpio moon in the 10th house is always a really great, the person never tires of their career because again, they're just like they're constantly like bringing that intensity. They go deeper than they need to.
Yeah, I mean, there's good ambition. I'm sure they get tired of a job or something if they're being weighed down really badly. But there is strong ambition and a strong will to do a good job, and for sure, that focus, that scorpionic focus. Should we go on to Moon and Sag?
Moon and Sag. I love Moon and
So Moon
Sag.
and Sag is another fire sign. Just like Aries, it's very active, but it's not as sensitive. It is sensitive like Aries, actually, but in a different way. Whereas Aries kind of absorbs the intensity in the moment with deep sensitivity of the sensorium of what it is to get information so quickly that it's reactive. Whereas Moon and Sag is a little more, it's Jupiter. So it's a little more
Yeah.
ambitious. It's a little more, I'm just going to put myself out into the world. I'm just going to do whatever. And so there could be a little less fear with a Jupiter, with a moon in Sagittarius. I think the moon is much more cleaving to the social world like a Libra moon. It's
Well,
much more
Sag's moon is like they're very blunt. And if they don't like you, they will tell you. It's weird because that's where the fiery kind of part I feel comes in Sagittarius. Whereas the Aries moon is just kind of rash. It's just saying it's like, oh, here's the thought. It appeared. It's
right, right, totally,
right
totally.
there it is. But Sag moon, like, they can be kind of cutting sometimes and they can be very, they're that fire can come out. But that being said, like they are like I think Sag moons everyone, they tend to get a pass. Sometimes people forget how blunt they can be because they're just so fucking funny. Like they're a very funny, dry, sarcastic, kind of mind. And a lot of people really appreciate that. And I think they kind of evoke kind of a nostalgia for a lot of people because being ruled by Jupiter and, being like the archer and like, the half man and the centaur, like it's like they have this connection, kind of this connection to probably some leftover artifact in our minds of archetypes, and people really understand the archetype of the archer, I feel, for some reason more than even the mother or Capricorn, the strict father. They understand this kind of jovial, you know wise, it's just probably we spent hundreds of years like discussing philosophy and in parlors with people and talking in this Sagittarian way, and I think it really kind of exists in this kind of like the memory, like our memory, our artifact memory of our minds, so I they do have that that Jovian quality. I mean, ruled, by Jupiter. And
They
so,
do, but that Jovian quality is at the expense of what a Cancer moon would have, for example. Like
mm,
I feel like they really need to put effort towards their emotional nature because they're
yeah,
going to be too mental. They're going to be too spiritual, too much spiritual fire that they almost have to work on like having real empathy, affection, and sympathy towards others, especially like if they have children, they have to work on that because
there's
they're
that whole thing as well about how, is it, maybe it was Judith Hill, were we talking about this, where I was, she was lecturing on Sagittarius in the signs, and I think she says something about someone's like, oh, well, who's gonna cheat? It's gonna be Scorpio. And she's like, no. She's like, it's gonna be Sagittarius.
yeah.
And I feel like it's true, especially Venus and Sagittarius is always like, it's got like one eye, like one roving eye, always like looking, like scoping out the competition because it's expansive, so you can't really, they're harder, I think, to tie down just to like these traditional relationships. They all kind of have a wandering eye, so, which is
Sometimes,
their
yeah,
flirt
sometimes.
kind of in a way as well.
I've seen loyal Sag moons, but yeah, that's definitely the nature. We kind of already did Capricorn moon, but we can really hammer it down for all the Capricorn moon lovers out there.
Oh yeah, right. And I was gonna say there's I can see them
Because there's
now.
nothing good to say, right? It's like,
Oh my God. I can
oh,
see them from a mile away now. Like
oh
Capricorn was so
yeah.
easy to spot. Was I telling you that my guitar player in my band was talking to my partner, and they were talking about guitar gear, and my guitar player in my band had just, my new guitar player. So I just, I hadn't done his chart yet. And he was wrapping up his guitar chords in this methodical way. And I was eavesdropping, and their conversation was like the most annoying, like anal, precise thing that no one else would care about. They were talking about some year guitar amp, and I'm a guitar player, right? So you think I have more compassion. But they're like, oh no, the rectifiers on the 74s, oh, they were not good. They just had this quality of like where the EQ just, and they were just having their Capricorn moon conversation about, like stuff that no one else really cares about being that precise. And I was like, Capricorn moon's at work. It was kind of, you know,
I
but
mean, I'm in awe. Like they have a certain capacity to recognize like precise reality, the Saturnian reality, and
hmm
respect it, right? Enough to like know the power issues, the balance issues, the communication, good, strong boundaries they can make. But once they're subjected to the onslaught of emotional reality, they're just lost.
yeah, they have a hard time seeing, they have a hard time walking in other people's shoes for sure. And Capricorn not only is the moon in detriment in Capricorn, but I feel like Capricorns get like a really bad rap in general. The sign is like, I remember like listening to someone talk about Capricorns, and they're like the most unsexy sign of the zodiac. I'm like,
That's fucked
so
up.
mean, but it's kind of true. Like everyone's like, oh, I'm a Capricorn. It's hard to be that sign that constantly makes the structure, and it's the cardinal structure too. So they're the ones, like Aquarius gets to be like, get all the glory for being the social justice warrior. And Capricorn is like, when they're like, okay, well, there's an invading army, who's going to dig that ditch? And Capricorn is always gonna be like, I'll do it. They're that initial kind of response to it. And it doesn't really they don't get enough credit, I think, for, kind of keeping everything limited and not making things crazy. Like if you're talking to a Capricorn moon and like you're having a hard time, they're always going to kind of like, at the time you might feel like, oh, they're not listening to me or relating, but they're really just trying to stop you from traumatizing yourself over and over. They're like, okay, heard it once. They're like, okay, move on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very efficient, very practical kind of ordinance, kind of organization towards life. I mean, meeting physical and material needs and making effort to be spiritual, if that's what they need. But what often I see too is there's a danger, and the danger is giving way to this like, overtly exacting or capricious attitudes because we already have a cold and unsympathetic position at hand.
Mm.
So you take that a little deeper, and that could get into brooding or even into callousness, could really degrade
It
the
can be a
disposition.
moody moon for sure. And
They
people
have to
don't
be
realize
really
that.
careful to incorporate like appreciation, gratitude for life. You know what
And
I mean? Like
that's the sign that has the hard time
this is what they need to
incorporating
work
the
on.
anima. Men with Capricorn moons have a hard time incorporating the anima because the anima is about this feminine intuition. And then, coming from it, you're going to develop like this, these qualities where, like, that's what they say, like, anima possession in a man makes them really moody because they can't figure out how to bring in the feminine aspect and kind of really incorporate into their personality. And so
So then they
Capricorn,
will project on the woman the mystique, and they will depend on the woman to hold the emotional guidance and the
right.
emotional register of the environment.
Right, and anima possessed men also really love to like find creative women too, because they're like, oh, here is, what I should be actually,
Mm.
bringing this forth in myself, but they're not. It kind of comes across as being moody. I think I was reading some quote and they were trying to attribute a quote to Jung, and they said that, the anima possessed man becomes bitchy, and I was like, I don't think Jung ever used the word bitchy, but I'm gonna look it up. Like, when did that?
Oh my God, like
Become
everyone in the world thinks they can say what Jung thought, it's
right. But I was like, I don't think that was a term that maybe was even around
it's
then.
ridiculous.
My favorite Capricorn moon story though, because they can be really oblivious. And I remember before I convinced my partner that astrology was a thing, he gave me like a gift. And he was like, I just like to get people practical gifts for Christmas. I'm like, all right, Capricorn moon, because they say things and you're like, Capricorn moon, they just don't get it. And I think I probably already told you this, but he got me like it's a pedal that splits your effects loops. And so, it makes your effects, you hit the button on one and it makes your delay run and you can isolate it. And then you can run like a wah or another pedal without compromising the sound. So that's a very Capricorn moon gift. Like it's imposing limitations on sound, on music. And then on the actual pedal itself, it had like a picture of Saturn. And like
What?
yeah, I'll show you a picture of the pedal. And I was just
Hilarious.
cracking up because he was like, astrology isn't real, says the Capricorn moon as he gives his girlfriend a pedal with a picture of Saturn on it that
That's
limits
crazy.
what she can play. It was hysterical. I only give practical gifts. That's the Capricorn moon. Yep.
I
Practical gifts.
mean, there's just a pause for appreciation of the Capricorn moon. I mean, it's very practical, you
And I
know.
will say that's their love language. They're gift givers because they want you to get your shit together and improve your life. So they're practical gift givers. But they're very generous because, yeah, they want you to get your shit together, basically. Unlike, well, I was gonna say Pisces moon, but I guess Aquarius moon is next, right?
Yeah, it'd probably be like more like Cancer moon. Aquarius moon is, it's a little more favorable. I mean, its effects are not as detrimental as on a Capricorn moon. Aquarius actually kind of shines on the moon very effectively, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. as cold or as inhuman as a Capricorn moon can be, perhaps perceptibly. Um, and so there's something very powerful about the perception of an Aquarius moon. Like they have a very good sense of reality in understanding like what's correct and what's not, what's correct behaviors, what's just a very sharp awareness is my take on it. What about you?
I think they're doing, for some reason, I want to bring all these moon, in the signs to Jungian aspects or Jungian kind of ideas, which I guess makes sense, being that, the subconscious and Jung and the moon and all this, correlation. But I feel like Aquarius moons do that thing that Jung talks about, which is like what is it, holding the tension of the opposites, which is like finding the third way, So if you have, you're fighting with, you have your like, your brother-in-law who loves Trump and your sister, in law on the other side who like, like is a bleeding heart liberal and like, you don't want to seat them next to each other at the table. You're going to put the Aquarian moon between them because they're going to be like, oh, and they're going to see both sides and they're going to have an eloquence at being able to balance this, and Jung actually says when you can do this, you can like grow your consciousness, right? You can evolve your consciousness by not picking a side, by, being not being black or white, but really trying to understand and they're also like a curious moon in a sense because they're also trying to figure out what benefits the social order. How can I kind of help the collective? So they have this kind of like sometimes when they're really kind of, if you're not connected to them in this way or having issues, they feel really detached. They're never, I feel, going to come across as this angry, fiery, violent person, but some they can be like a little detached. But I think for the most part, they are just really good at like seeing multiple things. They see the micro and the macro at the same time. And that's what I really like about them.
It's a very overall, it tends to be a very scientific attitude, but it kind of even masks any extremity in that. It's like you said, it's a very balanced perspective, taking in a lot into consideration. Sometimes a little too scientific, but
Again, that air sign, it's like the
yeah.
air sign, but air sign moons at the mercy of the collective. It's not just Libra, it's also the
Oh my
Aquarius.
God, I got the best example for Aquarius moon. This is such a great story. So I was working as a I was working at a job where I had to trust like the two people under me really well, right? Because I was managing something. And one of them was an Aquarius. She was a Capricorn sun and an Aquarius moon. And she was like my right hand. She was excellent at what she did, brilliant. And she was such an accomplished worker. And at the time, it had to deal with kids. We were working with kids. It was an after school program type situation. And we would go through so much emotional trauma, with the kids, that, and she would just be like a rock, just like just so just on point, no matter what the situation. And then every like couple months, 2, 3, 4 months would go by. Every 2, 3 months, she would just like out of nowhere just start crying and
Oh,
couldn't stop. And it was almost like she would suppress the emotion so much that at some point she couldn't control it anymore and she had to release the tension, the poisons in her body, right? And cry it out. But I remember, conversing with her while she started crying, like, what are you doing? Like, what are you crying for? She's like, I don't know. I just can't hold it down anymore. Just so there's this like repression. There's this
well, they're
deep, deep
detached
repression.
because they're ruled by Saturn, right? Which is like I said, the furthest planet away. So it's like they're observing all these other planets and other aspects, like from their kind of lofty place, on high. And so they just have like a bird's eye view of all these things. And I feel after a while, like, they just get kind of all this stuff gets kind of caught up and they're like, "Ugh," and it just becomes like a lot, taking all of it in.
Yeah, it's I think like we talked about for all the air signs, and you said this first, it's like hard for them to personalize anything. Like they just want to be that moon for the world. Like it's a very social, the air signs are very social in that regard. and they want to be clear for that. But you can't always. I mean, there's a moon in that Libra, there's a moon in that Aquarius, there's a moon in that Gemini. But it's very hard for them to personalize that bridge to others. It,
Yeah, it's true. It's
and
hard for them to kind of take on this individualization identity.
and I think in tandem with that, I want to say that I think it's the fire signs that have the most trouble with emotion. And I think we kind of touched on that with Aries moon being very uncomfortable with emotions in terms of its reactiveness to its sensitivity of the sensorium of the nervous system. Gemini, oh no, sorry, Gemini's air. Leo, we talked about a little. It wants Leo moon wants to shine, but it's the moon, so it's already shining.
Yeah.
There's an uncomfortability with the Leo moon as well in being able to handle emotional challenges. And there could be just like a shutting down. Like you just, you don't agree with me. You're wrong. And then shutting them out so that the sun moon can, the sunny moon in Leo can shine, without any shadows. The same thing with Sag, I said when I said that, yes, Sag, we both talked about Sag is expansive, fun, outgoing, exciting, jubilant, like a Jupiter. But at the same time, a challenge with incorporating affection and real emotional touch to the nature. And so I think that, people like to say that the water moons struggle the most with bearing the challenges of reality. But really, I think it's the fire moons that struggle the most because they don't know how to deal with emotions from the get-go. You know what I
The
mean? It's
fire moons clash, I think, the most with the other moons because when you have fire and an earth moon, there's always going to be a battle because some's fire wins and keeps on raging and some's earth wins, you know? And then, of course, fire and water, like we all know how that goes, you know? And then, but,
doesn't
fire and
go
earth,
well.
of
Yeah,
course,
it
is
doesn't go
perfect.
well.
Like, they're,
It can, but those would be other factors, other planetary factors.
but there's something about, yeah, the moon and the fiery signs. It's just not, it's not a state. I mean, the moon is, it's cold and moist, right? In traditional astrology.
These moons, like there's a lack of responsibility in them, I feel sometimes because they don't know how to take on a role, like Aquarius moon. Aquarius moon is a great teacher, it's a great diplomat in a sense, but it's not necessarily, the kind of mother you want.
Yeah, right, right.
Very difficult having a mother with moon in
Very
Aquarius
detached, very
because
detached.
they're not emotional, they're detached and they chum with you. They want to talk to you like you're a friend or something. And you're like, what? You're my mother, you know? And so they're very chummy, they're very friendly, they're very like
Well, they have the whole progressiveness too, where they're like, I'm not your mom, you can call me Rhonda. You know,
that's so weird.
right? And you're like, but I want you to be my mom.
Right. You're like,
I
I
want
want
you
to
to
call you
hug me and
mommy.
make
Hey,
me feel safe and make me cookies. And you're like,
Cookies,
no, I'm
chocolate
here for
chip.
you, and we can discuss birth control, and you can call me Rhonda if you want to.
That's insane. That's so wrong. All right. Now, I don't want to talk about Moon and Pisces at all. So I think,
I love them. I know everyone doesn't. I don't, it's
no,
almost like, when you have
just
when you
teasing.
have Venus in Pisces and it's so in its exaltation, it almost becomes like sickly sweet, It's like,
Sickly sweet. There we go.
oh yeah, and it's like spoiled almost, but it's so good. It's like you're like, I'm eating ice cream until I barf.
It's horrible.
Right?
No, Moon and Pisces is sweet. I have to say, I love Moon
It
and Pisces.
is sweet. And they're just
'Cause
like off in their own worlds. I mean,
they're like children. I mean, like they're in the everything's fantastical.
right.
Except when it's horrific, but otherwise it's fantastical.
Everything is fantastical, and then yeah, some of the Pisces men they are like a child, like they're like running through the yard, and they're like, oh, the flowers are talking to me, and oh, like this is, and then they have a moment where then you can say to them, well, every step you're taking, you're killing bugs, and they're all and they start crying. They have that kind of sensitivity, that turn on a dime sensitivity, but they're always, I mean, they're one of my favorite moon signs. I love moon in Pisces, you know.
Yeah. And it's just the challenge could be similar perhaps to the Virgo. Just a minor unwillingness to accept things as they are. That's all. No
I
big deal.
also think that, the signs that I feel like Pisces, whenever you have planets in Pisces, they don't want to let go. They don't want to because they have to move on to Aries to begin the cycle anew. And it's like work. It's like you're the one breaking the snow, and like making the path when you step into Aries. You have to be the originator. And like I think it's just nice to stay in Pisces. It's like it's the womb. It's you're swimming around in these mystical waters and like, you're taken care of and you just don't have a care in the world, unless you get like slightly hurt, like or like, you get a hangnail or something and then it's like the end of the world. But yeah, I think there's something about that perpetual Peter Pan aspect to the moon in Pisces because the moon doesn't want to move into Aries and kind of make those harsh decisions and just be like, here I am. Okay, it's like moon into Aries is like it's Monday and everyone has to go back to school. Moon in Pisces is like Sunday and it's everything is perfect and time is going forever and it's very childlike and very
So
sweet.
they got to work on accepting reality as is. And
Right.
they have to be aware of their susceptibility to drugs and alcohol,
Yes, and that's a
which
big
can
one
lead
for
them astray
Pisces.
and can lead them to lose their boundaries,
Yeah.
which are well needed. Those boundaries are thin enough with the Pisces moon. There's not much they miss. They can see this world and the Neptunian world. They have access to the Neptune, to the Plato of reality, to the fantastical, which is what creates reality. So there has to be a very conceited effort to work on these aspects of themselves that are not highly developed. They need to work on their character, their will, you
Their
know,
boundaries. They need to start,
their
creating
boundaries.
boundaries.
Yeah, it's very important for them because I mean, we're all jealous of their visionary power and their visionary creative skills and capacity to see all worlds, but that comes with a cost, that ease of which they can pass from one world to the next. And the cost can be the feeling that they always need to be in or have that capacity to be in those visionary worlds. Like we have to sober up, all of us do. Neptunian reality is a kind of drug, it's a kind of high in itself. And so thus it feeds on more, and what's the easy way to get there? The
In
shortcut.
Pisces, you can really see that higher octave of Neptune more than any of the other outer planets, I feel. And I also feel like there's the other thing with Pisces moon is that they can be pushovers, They can like have a hard time with, sexual advances. They can be led into situations where they don't necessarily want to be. It's, that's the thing with the water moons as well, is like they're not good at boundaries. They're not good at establishing these parameters. They're just these vessels kind of emotion and it's hard, it's water. It's just the nature of it to kind of overflow and it just spews out. And people don't even, people are still arguing. Scientists are like, how many phases of water are they? And there's the people that study water like Veda Austin and who's the Japanese scientist that did so much work on the memory of water?
Yamamoto or something.
Yeah, he's just they're talking about how water in the body, like, does it act like a gel, this fourth phase? And people always point out, well, that you're never going to get a scientific grant to study water. They're scientists like, we know everything there is to know about water, but we really don't. And so they're kind of like all the water signs, you can put them in a cup or you can, put a pond in your backyard or you can like, fill your fish tank exact or your measuring cup, but it's always that risk of like sloshing over because it's water. So there's always that risk of not being able to have those boundaries and like just like water requires like all the examples I just gave, it requires, a vessel, and so if they're not aware of their vessel and the capacity of their vessel, they're going to be in trouble.
I wonder, like, we didn't touch on this, but I feel to bring it up is with the air moons, there's also a similar quality, but it would be more through disassociation.
Mm,
You know
right,
what I mean, a quality to like not to kind of just be too allow reality to pass through the boundaries. It would be
right.
disassociativeness because they're here, they're not here in their heart. So they're not like quite understanding, and it can get stuck because, the intelligence works through all the body. But if they're too calculating or too, intellectual, then they can get stuck there, and not be aware of certain layers.
Unlike, the earth signs too that have, I mean, I was just talking to someone about, Venus and Virgo, obviously where, it's in its fall, but Venus and Virgo, they set their boundaries and they're often so picky. They're like, I don't want to date anyone, no
Mhm.
one's good enough, but that's, they're drawing literally that line of the sand because they are earth, and the water signs don't have that. The line of that sand gets blurred so easily.
Well said. Yeah, the earth signs can get a little too stuck.
Hmm.
Their boundaries and the air signs are like flowing, and so they can disassociate, and the water signs can, be here and not here. They're so psychic and sensitive that they could be here 1 minute and like in some other universe, and then they got to get back, and
Which reminds me of the last thing we should really talk about with the moons is we were talking about the least aspected moons. We had the
beautiful you
Plutonic
brought that up. That's my favorite thing to bring up. Wow, I love it.
because you think about that the moon making right, the moon is constantly talking, to the other planets and other kinds of astrology, but also that the whole thing, yeah, the moon, it's Cancer is its home and it is moody and it's, it is kind of complying with like every sign. It's just, it's so it really takes on the characteristics of a sign of every sign. And sometimes, like the other planets, like I said, like, Venus and Taurus, Venus and Pisces don't have the same distinction as the moon in Taurus and the moon in Pisces. The moon fully embodies, that zodiac sign. And so when you have the moon not making aspects, like how is that going to show up? Because the moon is like, it's like the kind of the social butterfly of all the planets, it's running around making all these connections. And when it's not, you're going to have this person that's in their own head and they're, because like, in Ori, the moon is always sharing light or there's like transmission. And so it's kind of doing its own communication. But if it's just by itself and, the moon needs to illuminate, right? That's what it does. So if it can't do that, you're going to have someone that's just in dream world all the time, right? This least aspected moon.
So funny you bring that up. So in the book of one of my teachers, Transcendental Astrocartography, this book is sold out, by the way, so you won't find it, and out of print, rather. And in this book, the author goes over all the least aspected planets, like how they all look. But what's really cool is at the end of the book, there's an interview with him, I think with him, or with the client who has the least aspected moon. And somehow it's able to convey this deep, deep, deep psychic sensibility to the least aspected moon. Because what what the consideration that Tula is making when she brings up least aspected planet, and in this case the moon, is a planet that is not caught in the web of the geometry of the planetary aspects.
Right.
So that planet's going to be off on its own somewhere, and you're not going to see those lines of 90 degrees, 120 odd degrees or whatever. And what that means is that that moon can act by itself. It can act with great power.
It's like a free agent.
Yeah, yes, yes. It doesn't have to sign a contract. It's
Hmm.
a free agent. And so when the moon is a free agent, I mean, and this is the kind of contrast we deal with in astrology, whereas we seem to be describing these planetary bodies, right, that are fixed and solid, but the moon is not that at all. It's seemingly holographic, and we're not even going to get into that.
Right.
and has a refractive quality. And yes, like the sun, it garners us with light at nighttime, at a time where there's an absence of light. It actually provides its own light, or seemingly so from the sun, but I think it provides its own light, whatever it is. And so in that quality, like Tula was saying, like there's a quality of deep, deep, deep psychic sensitivity to people that are moon least aspected, because it's almost like they live in another world. Like, I mean, I'm an LAP moon, and I'm so sensitive to reality that mostly it's an abhorrent to me, because there's so much noise and there's so much talk and there's so much stimulation, and it's really overwhelming, and it gets inside of me when I'm out there too much, and it kind of plays out in me, and I have to like filter it out and find my music and find my space, almost like my fantasy realm to come home to, because it feels more home to me. So it's a very, I say as an LAP moon myself, like it's very much a fantastical realm that we want to live in, because it needs to be secure. I mean, let me say one more thing about this. Like when we consider the moon, or even the nature of the moon, especially in a least aspected sense, what we're talking about is a protective intelligence, like almost like an egg. Nothing else can break through. It's just like a supportive system where like one can stay in their own world and stay safe in that world. That's really what it is. And it's an emotional psychic awareness. So it's, even though it seems to be caught up in its own little egg, it's everywhere because it picks up everything. So it's like it almost doesn't even need to leave its world. Like the psychic awareness of an LAP moon is very
Yeah, it's like if you go visit your friends and they're like hippies and they live out in the country and they like,
practical example.
they have like the water because they have a gray water system, they have a composting toilet, and they grow all their own plants and stuff. They never need to leave. Like the home is just complete. It's like it's a whole ecosystem
The
in
whole
it.
ecosystem on its own, right? It has its own rhythm, it has its own phases, right? Everything a moon has. And it's a safeguard against the past and the future. It's like a non-temporal realm they prefer to be in. I prefer the dream space myself, because it's something like it's a realm that like I can wake from and be like, okay, now I'm just in my own space. I was out there, but now I'm in reality, which is here.
Right.
It's so weird, such a weird conception, but it is very much the space of an LAP moon. We didn't mention the LAP sun in our first video, but
Oh yeah, we didn't get around to it.
that's okay. An LAP sun is like Leo anyways. It's just Leonian qualities, right?
Yeah, right.
And an LAP moon, what I described is like a moon, a Cancer moon on steroids, or a Pisces moon on steroids, Any moon LAP is going to be like the full representation of where it's exalted. Even if it's an Aries moon that's least aspect, it doesn't matter. The quality of the moon itself being least aspected, those qualities of the moon will overpower the sign that it's in, and it will take on the quality of an exalted moon, as I see it, because it's in full power. It's in
Right. And of course, we've mentioned too that, in Hellenistic astrology and, modern astrology too, where if the moon's not making an aspect to anything, like if you schedule like, a doctor's appointment, like it's just, your appointment's gonna get rebooked or you're gonna be late in traffic or you can't, like, just nothing, it kind of just exists in its own little realm. It's hard to connect. It's not being heard by the other planets. So it's hard for the moon to kind of pull in the strengths of the other planets. Like, hey, I need some help here, Venus, and I need some help here, Saturn. But it's just like, this little moon yelling, and if it does need help, which I feel like they rarely do. They're usually pretty good at like being in their own little realm, their own little world. But you know, in a situation where maybe something like happens and you know, you call the ambulance, like the moon is like, you know, getting the empty dial tone, you know what I mean? And trying to just, you know, reach the other planets. It's just not, they're not picking up. You know, the moon, you know, if it the moon needs to be heard, it's so used to being heard that when it goes void of course in the chart, you know, it's not going to have a lot of influence. And we are so influenced by the moon. And that kind of goes back to the start of this video when we were, because we can do a whole nother video on like the origin of the moon and, you know, is the moon a satellite? Is the moon a hologram? Is the moon plasma? Like, what is the moon? Like, we, you know, it's such a huge topic to explore. But that's the whole, it doesn't really matter, you know, when they say in the Sumerian astrology, right, where Marduk fashions the moon, it's like we've all been born under this, you know, the electromagnetic frequencies or whatever of the moon imprinted upon us. So it doesn't matter if we think it's, you know, an artificial or natural object or not. We're living in this kind of zeitgeist where we are ruled by our moon sign. So it is important, you know, to not get kind of too caught up in the Gnostic, like archonic, like, oh, the moon is fake. And, you know, because the moon sign for people, like, you know, you can tell, oh, you're a moon in Scorpio, oh, you're a moon in Taurus. You know, we still bear those imprints, no matter if it's like an artificial system. It's one that's been in place for, you know, a few thousand years now. So,
We should do a video on the personality disorder susceptibility relative to one's moon sign.
oh yeah,
You
that
kind of
like,
touched on it a bit when you said ADHD for the Gemini moon, I think.
right. Eighth house moons are a whole another different thing as well.
OCD for the Scorpio moon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. OCD and the Pluto moon as well. Yep.
Yeah, Pluto moon is OCD overture. Yeah, what would, yeah, there's, anyways, that'd be another
I was
video.
like I was like the bipolar moon, the
Bipolar
Sea
moon.
moon, the Asperger.
Bipolar moon would be a
Virgo is
perfect
the
one.
Asperger moon. That's, you
Virgo
know.
would be Asperger moon, right? What would be the moon of, no, I can't remember them all. Okay. So me and Tula decided prior to this video that like this is two in our series. The first was the sun, then the moon, and then we're probably going to do like a 2A, B, C, D, E, F, G if we continue to do other moon themes like the origin or true meaning of what the
Maybe
moon
we should do Roman numerals. That would be a little more
is.
fun.
No, I
Maybe.
can't read Roman
Oh,
numerals. I was absent that day at school. I
oh.
remember this clearly. I remember it because I saw it in the math book. I was like, oh, Nick, tomorrow we're gonna learn Roman numerals. And like I got sick or something and I couldn't get to school, so now I have this block. And so when I see
Even
Roman
up till 20? Because if you do tarot cards, you got to get at least, right? That's, you know.
no, I don't want to. I just ignore it. Like when I see like I can't compute, can't do it. So that's it. That's it. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you don't enjoy, tell us and we'll stop and we'll never finish the series. But if you enjoy it, if you
That's so
enjoy
Aries moon. Like it's so hurt. It's like if you don't like it, fine.
it. And if you like it, then maybe we'll continue to a part three, or we'll
Part
do the emissary of the sun.
BAPA, somewhere
No, we
in
got to do the Earth too, the Earth sign for the
there.
human design. But we won't be able to say anything about that. Who pays attention to the Earth? You know, it's the opposite of the sun. We can do it. The opposite of the sun. We
The
always need
sun.
to incorporate. The medicine is always the polar sign.
Well, we can talk about how there's, you know, like when the Earth does have an orbit, like it's very slight, but it does have an orbit, you know. It's like it's kind of that thing that the Earth just gets neglected because we're like, you know, we just forget because we just take it for granted, you know.
Yeah, we should start an Earth sign in astrology. We'll start a movement. What's your Earth
And
sign?
you
My
can
Earth
send
sign
it,
is, what's yours?
you can like send it through satellites to other civilizations because they can be like
What?
this is in Gemini. Oh, my Earth is in Cancer. What does that mean? Other planets.
Stupid. All right. So next time we haven't decided yet, but we'll either do a part three in Mercury, the emissary of the sun, or we'll do your Earth signs. We'll create a new movement of Earth. So what's your Earth sign?
We can talk. We can talk about all the there's more than just one astronomer who decided that. There's a lot of people who are like, well, no, like the it does revolve around the Earth. We are kind of like this Earth-centric.
What are you talking
It
about? What
doesn't matter if
revolves
we're
around the
revolving
Earth?
around the sun. It's a very materialistic, very, again, very zeitgeist to be like, oh, the planet does revolve around us right now because we're not doing our sun work, so we might as well.
Yeah, Tula reminds us well that we need to do our solar work. We need to be with the sun every day that we can.
And to also, like, if the sun's in your fourth house, you need to be working on that ego and self-attached to your family. And if the sun is in the 11th, like, you can't just stay at home and order DoorDash and play Worlds of Warcraft. Okay. You need to be out there with, even though the 11th house does have modern day internet connotations, but, you have to really be represented in this social group. You have to do the work of the sun. And then maybe we'll get the sun from the old day woodcuts, from the 14th and
But
15th
if your
century.
sun in the 12th, can you still stay home and do the World of Warcraft or no?
No, if your sun is in the 12th, like, oh, how ugly am I? I can't leave the house and no one
What?
likes me and or you're in the insane asylum. So
That's fucked up. Or
I
you're
love
hidden by a
12. I
computer,
love 12
hidden by a
house suns.
computer
That's the
for
most
work.
humble of the sun signs. Let's just say that.
Yeah, there's a lot of humility there.
Yeah.
Too much.
No one sees, what is it, the 12th house sun. They never see how they illuminate other people's lives, which
Wow,
is,
that's
yeah.
beautiful.
But sad too.
All right, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah,
Thanks so
good.
much for watching, everyone. Thank you, Tula, for being here,
Mhm.
and we'll call it at that.